Most people think real performance upgrades start at $500. Cams, tunes, intakes, exhaust, stuff that sounds impressive but also empties your wallet fast. The truth is, some of the biggest measurable performance gains I've ever tested on Ford vehicles came from parts that cost less than a tank of gas. I'm not talking about placebo mods. I'm talking about changes you can feel from the driver's seat, seeing data logs, and measure with real before and after testing. Throttle response improvements, temperature drops, smoother power delivery, even small miles per gallon gains that add up over time. And the wild part is most Ford owners either overlook these upgrades or assume they're pointless because of the price tag. I've tested dozens of so-called budget mods over the years, and most of them are junk. Stickers, gimmicks, snake oil, but a few consistently outperform expectations, especially on modern Ford platforms like the F-150, Ranger, Mustang, Explorer, and Bronco. These are upgrades you can install in under an hour with basic tools and without voiding warranties. Today we're covering 3 more Ford performance upgrades that cost around $50 or less, and I'll walk you through exactly what changed when I tested them. No hype, no theory, just results. This is part 1 of the breakdown, and by the end of part 2, you'll understand why cheap doesn't always mean ineffective. The first upgrade surprised me because it fixes a problem Ford created on purpose. From the factory, most modern Fords use extremely soft throttle mapping. I'm not talking about engine power, I'm talking about how your right foot communicates with the throttle body. You press the pedal, and the computer decides how much throttle you are allowed to have. Ford does this for fuel economy, emissions compliance, and smoothness for the average driver. The downside is lag. That half a second delay when you tip into the throttle from a stop, that mushy feeling when you try to merge into traffic, that's not your engine being weak, that's the pedal lying to the computer. A throttle pedal spacer costs about $30 to $40. It does not add horsepower, it does not re-flash the engine control unit. All it does is change the pedal's physical position slightly so the sensor reads more input earlier in the pedal travel. I tested this on a 3.5 EcoBoost F-150 and a 5.0 Mustang back-to-back. Stock, both vehicles required roughly the same pedal travel to reach 50% throttle. After installing the spacer, that same throttle opening happened about 20% earlier in pedal travel. The result was not more power, but faster access to the power that already existed. Real-world testing showed a consistent reduction in 0 to 30 miles per hour time by about 0.2 of a second, purely because the engine responded sooner. Throttle tip-in felt immediate instead of delayed. Downshifts happened faster because the engine control unit saw more aggressive input. The truck felt lighter, even though nothing mechanical changed. Fuel economy stayed the same because cruising throttle did not change, only initial response. The biggest benefit was drivability. Parking lot maneuvering, rolling starts, and passing at highway speeds all felt more controlled and predictable. Installation took 10 minutes with a socket and required no calibration. This is one of those upgrades where you drive 5 minutes and wonder why it did not come this way from the factory. The second upgrade addresses heat, the silent killer of performance. Ford engine bays are tight, especially on turbo models. Heat soak robs power, increases knock correction, and forces the ECU to pull timing. Most people think the solution is an expensive intercooler or an aftermarket intake, but there is a much cheaper place to start: a hood seal modification. From the factory, many Fords have a full perimeter hood seal that traps hot air in the engine bay. It is great for noise reduction and water management, but terrible for airflow. For under $50, you can remove or partially modify the rear hood seal and replace it with a vented edge trim, or simply leave that section open depending on your climate. I tested this on an EcoBoost Explorer using an OBD data logger. Before the modification, intake air temperatures after sitting in traffic averaged 35 to 40 degrees above ambient. After the modification, the same conditions resulted in temperatures only 20 to 25 degrees above ambient. That is a massive difference for turbo efficiency. On repeated pulls, timing stayed more consistent, and power delivery did not fall off as quickly. There was no increase in engine bay water intrusion during rain testing, and cabin noise increase was negligible. The biggest improvement was recovery time. Heat soak dissipated faster once the vehicle started moving again. That means more consistent performance in real-world driving, not just one perfect pull. This is part 1's sleeper upgrade, because it doesn't look flashy, but the data doesn't lie. The third upgrade is one of the cheapest and most overlooked performance improvements you can make, and it lives under the hood, but has nothing to do with air or fuel. It is grounding. From the factory, Ford grounding is adequate, not optimized. The system works, but electrical resistance varies as the vehicle ages. Heat cycles, corrosion, and vibration all degrade ground paths over time. That affects sensor accuracy, ignition consistency, and even transmission behavior. A basic engine bay grounding kit costs between $20 and $40 if you build it yourself, or about $50 for a pre-made kit. I installed one on a 2.7 EcoBoost F-150 and logged data before and after. The changes were not dramatic on paper, but they were consistent. Idle voltage stabilized. Throttle response smoothed out. Cold starts were cleaner. On the road, shifts felt slightly more decisive, especially during part throttle acceleration. The real test came with ignition timing consistency. With improved grounding, knock sensor activity decreased slightly under load, allowing the ECU to hold timing more steadily. That translated to smoother power delivery rather than higher peak numbers. This is not a Dyno Queen mod, it is a reliability and drivability upgrade. Over time, improved grounding reduces electrical noise, which helps every sensor do its job more accurately. Installation took about 30 minutes and required nothing more than hand tools. When you stack these upgrades together, the effect compounds. Faster throttle response, lower heat soak, more consistent electrical signals. None of these alone transform your Ford into a race truck, but together they make it feel sharper, more responsive, and more refined in daily driving. And the total cost still comes in under what most people spend on a single cosmetic mod. If you have been chasing performance the expensive way and ignoring the basics, this is your sign to rethink the approach. Real gains do not always come from big parts. Sometimes they come from fixing the small compromises manufacturers make to satisfy the average buyer. If this helps you, make sure you are subscribed, because most people never hear about these mods until they have already spent way too much money chasing the wrong upgrades. Most people hit a wall when they start chasing performance because they assume the next step has to be expensive. Bigger parts, louder parts, flashier parts. That mindset is exactly why so many Ford owners skip over the upgrades that actually change how the vehicle behaves every single day. The reality is that Ford already built plenty of performance into these platforms, then softened and restricted it in key areas to satisfy comfort, noise regulations, and efficiency targets. When you remove those restrictions intelligently, even with cheap parts, the difference is impossible to ignore. One of the most common restrictions lives right in front of the engine, and almost nobody talks about it. The factory intake tube. Not the airbox, not the filter, the tube itself. On many Ford EcoBoost engines, the intake tube is packed with molded-in sound chambers and baffles. Their only job is to quiet airflow noise. They do not exist to improve performance. In fact, they do the opposite. They disrupt airflow during rapid throttle changes, which is exactly when you want the engine to respond cleanly. Replacing just the intake tube with a smooth aftermarket version costs right around $50 if you leave the factory airbox in place. That is important because this is not about making the engine louder or changing filtration. It is about AIR flow efficiency. When I tested this on a 3.5 EcoBoost F-150, the improvement showed up immediately in how the truck responded to throttle input. The hesitation during quick pedal movements was reduced. Boost came on smoother instead of ramping up unevenly. It did not feel like more power, it felt like better control over the power that was already there. Data logging confirmed what the seat of the pants test suggested. Airflow readings during rapid throttle transitions were more stable. The engine control unit was not correcting as aggressively to smooth things out. That means less intervention and a more direct response. In daily driving, especially in traffic or during passing maneuvers, the truck required less pedal input to achieve the same movement. It's a small change, but it stacks up over thousands of miles. Ford quieted the intake to make the truck feel refined. Removing that artificial restriction makes it feel sharper without sacrificing reliability or emissions compliance. Another area Ford softens heavily is the drivetrain itself. This is where a lot of energy disappears before it ever reaches the tires. From the factory, the rear differential is mounted using very soft rubber bushings. These bushings are designed to isolate noise and vibration, not to transfer torque efficiently. Under acceleration, the differential actually twists slightly before fully loading the drivetrain, and that movement absorbs energy and creates delay. Differential bushing inserts are one of the cheapest ways to reduce that loss. Most kits cost between $30 and $50 and install without removing the differential. They simply fill the voids in the factory bushings, limiting how much they can flex. I tested these on both a Ranger and an F-150, and the difference was noticeable the moment I drove off. Throttle response from a stop felt tighter. The vague, rubbery delay between pressing the pedal and feeling the truck move was reduced. On the Ranger, which is known for rear-end movement under load, wheel hop during hard acceleration was significantly improved. The drivetrain felt more connected, like the engine and wheels were communicating more directly instead of through a cushion. There was also a big improvement during throttle transitions. That clunk or lurch you sometimes feel when getting back on the gas after coasting nearly disappeared. This matters more than people realize because smoother torque delivery reduces stress on U-joints, drive shafts, and transmission components. There was a slight increase in vibration at idle in one test vehicle, but once moving, it was not noticeable. For anyone who tows or drives aggressively, this is one of the highest return upgrades you can make for very little money. Heat management is another area where Ford prioritizes efficiency over consistency. Modern Ford transmissions, especially the 10-speed, are incredibly capable but also very sensitive to temperature. From the factory, Ford uses a thermal valve to restrict transmission cooler flow until the fluid reaches a specific temperature. This helps with emissions and warm-up efficiency, but it also allows higher peak temperatures under load. A thermal valve bypass or an upgraded valve costs about $50 and can dramatically improve temperature stability. I tested this on a 10-speed F-150 under towing conditions. With the factory setup, transmission temperatures routinely climbed into the 215 to 220 degrees range during sustained highway pulls. After the bypass, the same route and load resulted in temperatures closer to 190 to 195 degrees. That difference isn't just about longevity, it is about consistency. Lower, more stable fluid temperatures meant smoother shifts and less gear hunting under load. The transmission felt calmer and more predictable. Over time, this also protects clutch packs and fluid integrity. Many owners worry that allowing earlier cooling will cause issues in cold weather, but in real-world testing, warm-up was still perfectly normal for daily driving. The difference is the system stops waiting to protect itself once things get hot. The final upgrade addresses something drivers feel constantly but rarely know how to fix: brake pedal feel. Ford brakes are powerful, but on many platforms the pedal feels soft or vague, especially after repeated braking. That is not always the pads or the fluid. A big part of it is the factory rubber brake lines. Rubber expands slightly under pressure, and that expansion absorbs force that should be going to the calipers. Upgrading to stainless braided front brake lines can be done for around $50 if you focus on the front only. You do not need a full four-corner setup to feel the improvement. I installed front stainless lines on both a Mustang and an Explorer ST. The change was immediate. The brake pedal felt firmer with less travel before engagement. Under repeated braking, the pedal stayed consistent instead of gradually getting spongy. Stopping distances did not drastically change in a single panic stop because tires and pad compounds still matter most there. But control improved and confidence improved. The brakes responded exactly when commanded, which is critical for performance driving towing, and emergency situations. This upgrade does not make the brakes stronger on paper, but it makes them more predictable, which is just as important. When you look at these upgrades together, they all follow the same philosophy. They do not add power, and they do not chase numbers. They remove inefficiencies Ford built in to satisfy broad market demands. By improving airflow consistency, reducing drivetrain flex, stabilizing transmission temperatures, and sharpening brake response, the vehicle feels more precise and more capable in real-world conditions. That is what real performance looks like. Not bragging rights, not dyno charts, but a vehicle that responds the same way every time you ask something of it. For around $50 per upgrade, these changes deliver exactly that. And once you experience it, it becomes very clear why cheap does not automatically mean useless.